We may put it to the objectors whether it be either absurd or unwarrantable statedly to connect preparation with the observance of the supper. If not, as must be granted in favor of at least one species of preparation, 1 Corinthians 11, verses 28 and 31, then the question resolves itself into this: whether fasting be a proper and justifiable mode for preparation. For if the affirmative be proved, the argument from statedly observing a fast previous to the supper is lost as to all the use it was intended to serve. The constancy of the recourse to this mode of preparation cannot prove it unwarrantable, but there seems to be some ambiguity to the application of the term stated. We find it often used by the objectors to denote the periodical recurrence of the fast and Thanksgiving days in the Presbyterian method. And then the argument is that they are thus converted into holidays. At other times it bears on the nature of the supper, as according to the views of our opponents, a part of the ordinary public worship of God. And then the argument is either that the observance of these days moves the supper from its proper sphere by rendering weekly communion impracticable, or that the exercises of fasting and thanksgiving, which are extraordinary duties, are moved from their proper sphere by being connected with what ought to be regarded as an ordinary part of the worship of God. Let us consider the proof of unwarrantableness brought forward in these several ways. Number 1. By the periodical recurrence of the fast and Thanksgiving days along with the supper, they are converted into holidays. This argument we should scarcely have expected from one who seems to have studied on this very subject, the Catholic controversy, who is able to quote Chemnitz, even against Protestants. Yet this is the style of his reasoning. Talk no more to a Papist or an Episcopalian of his uncommanded holy days. He will reply that you have no objection to holy days, provided they be of your own appointment. Question him not about the fast of Good Friday before Easter Sunday. He will question you in his turn about your Thursday or Friday fast before what he would call Sacrament Sunday. Ask not his warrant from the Bible. He will retort by asking yours. He will produce quite as many and quite as good proofs for Lent as you can for your fast days, and infinitely more examples. Mason, in his letters, page 110. This is a pretty bold censure on a certain body of Christians in Scotland, with whom Mr. Mason stands intimately connected. It would have been prudent at least to have concealed their anti-Christian practice till either reformation had been effected in a regular manner, or his communion with them wholly dissolved. He had forgotten the conduct of Ham. The pathetic exclamation of David, "Tell it not in Gath, lest," etc., was not in his mind. But does Mr. M not know that line of distinction is clear, that in the case of fast or Thanksgiving days, the sanctity of the day or portion of time rests on the exercises and service to which it is devoted, whereas in the case of holy days, a previous sanctity of the day requiring such and such exercises is supposed. This sanctity, which is considered as inherent to the day, or ever attaching to it, is its annual recurrence. Arises from its being dedicated to some saint, or commemorative of some great event. But it belongs to God only to hallow a day, or stamp upon it a permanent sanctity, which shall be the reason of our being bound to keep it sacred to him. Mr. M. was not ignorant of this. He has remarked it in a note on page 111. The difference, however, he apprehends is merely circumstantial. The principle on which we and the Papists proceed is the same. This is all the apology for his extravagant assertions. He has proved that there is any previous sanctity supposed in the Thursday or Friday before the observance of the supper, as in the case of Good Friday, requiring the exercise of fasting, or that the special observance of these days is ordained by an ecclesiastical law. Our defense is simple. In the opinion of Papists and Episcopalians, on holy days, the time regulates the duty, as in the Sabbath, both being observed in their periodical recurrence as holy times. But, with regard to the days employed in religious worship, both before and after sacramental occasions, the duty regulates the time. Anderson, page 312. If humiliation and thanksgiving be judged proper, some time must be allotted for them, and such days must be chosen as shall best suit the relation in which these exercises stand to the supper. The dispensation of the supper may be fixed to certain times of periodical recurrence in the different congregations which constitute a body of Christians. But this is merely and properly circumstantial. No Sabbath is held to be more sacred than another, or to have a claim beyond others on the commemoration of our Lord's death. Conveniency and the accommodation of brethren must be studied. And can any be so foolish as to imagine, not to say argue, that because on these grounds there is a stated or periodical recurrence of the dispensation of the supper, therefore the days of fasting and thanksgiving, which are judged proper to attend it, are converted into so many holy days to the different congregations in which it takes place? Number 2. The supper pertains to the stated, that is, ordinary worship of God, but the concomitant days move it from its sphere. They are unwarrantable because they render its being observed as a part of ordinary worship impracticable. If, says Mr. Mason, just regard were shown in this particular frequency of communion to the dying precept of our Lord, and all the extra days of worship kept up, no congregation either would or should submit to that burden. Letters, page 99. Could it be shown that the frequency of dispensation in the same place is incumbent from the dying precept of our Lord, or any other precept, or even from the nature of the ordinance, as would be incompatible with the observance of the days, or would render it detrimental to the interests of individuals and society? Then indeed we might acknowledge their appointment unwarrantable. There is nothing, however, in regard to the ends for which the supper was appointed, that requires more than occasional celebration. And here a footnote. Section 2, at the beginning, the term occasional is obviously used in opposition to stated, as denoting what belongs to the common service of every Sabbath. The dispensation of the supper may be occasional in the sense meant, yet for reasons of expediency fixed to times of periodical recurrence in the several congregations of which a body is composed. It may also be occasional, yet one of the outward and ordinary means whereby Christ communicated to us the benefits of redemption, namely, in opposition to extraordinary means, such as those employed by the call of Abraham, or the conversion of Paul. Nothing can be more evident than that our reformers used the word ordinary as signifying usual in the confession of faith, catechisms, and other deeds, where it is applied to the institutions of the gospel. It is by no means descriptive of the qualities of these institutions, or the relation in which they stand to each other. Thus diamonds, gold and silver earrings, and cloth of various texture may be said to be outward and ordinary parts of ornament or dress in some countries, but that there is a very great difference in the qualities, etc., of these things, every person knows. And weekly communion in particular is, we have seen, not only destitute of scriptural warrant, but contrary to one great design of the ordinance which directs to occasional celebration, and to fulfill which we shall endeavor to show that our second proposition, the observance of the days, greatly contributes. Number 3. Still the objection of unwarrantableness is urged on the ground that in connecting fasting and thanksgiving with the dispensation of the supper, we combine duties that ought not to be combined and are guilty of a mixture which God never mingled. Letters on Communion, pages 97 and 98. The exercise of fasting, we might reply, on the day of annual atonement was as stated as the day, and the solemnities of it. This mixture was by divine appointment, and shall we deem it improper? No. But there is no similar appointment. We shall be told, in the New Testament age, that the principles on which the observance of fasts is warranted to us do not permit the connection we have devised. In this sense there is a mixture which God never mingled, for the connection between the supper and the fast and thanksgiving days is a human device, and the compound as real in addition to God's appointments as human presumption ever ventured upon. Letters on Communion, pages 97 and 98. Had the connection been established by a law and made essential to the right observance of the sacrament, there might have been some ground for the charge. According to the present plan, it can no more be a human device than the appointment of fasting by the office bearers of the Church or on any other proper occasion. Nor does our faith stand in the wisdom of men, Letters on Communion, pages 97 and 98, when they ordain fasts on such occasions as are allowed to warrant them by the Word. The objection, however, proceeds on the idea that the supper is not a proper occasion, the sacrament being an ordinary institution of the gospel, and which belongs equally to times of prosperity and adversity, can never furnish any special occasion of fasting and thanksgiving. Letters on Communion, pages 70 and 102. In this position, the emphasis sometimes rests on the word ordinary, and then the argument is that the sacrament, being a part of the common service of God, like the preaching of the Word, can furnish no call for extraordinary duties. We have shown that it is, as really as the Passover was, a special ordinance, not intended for constant celebration, Nor, as has also been remarked, is there anything in the standards of our Church inconsistent with this, ordinary parts of worship, mean in the confession of faith, what belongs to the established service of God independently of providential calls. We are not to wait for some providential call to celebrate the supper, nor does our warrant for keeping it depend on any such warning.